All my life I thought I was simply unloved. And then I found out that I am not my father's son at all. I am a reminder of a betrayal that my family has never forgiven. Since childhood, I felt like a stranger in my own family, like I was always on the outside looking in through a window no one ever opened for me. Birthdays, holidays, even simple everyday moments, they were never mine in the way they seemed to belong to my siblings. I remember one birthday in particular, maybe the one that finally sealed it in my mind. I came downstairs, hopeful in that small way kids always are, even when they've been disappointed before. I was greeted with a single cupcake sitting on the kitchen table, no candles, no card, just the silence of indifference and the flat tone of my mom saying, "There you go." That was it. No gifts. No party. Nothing that marked the day as special or me as someone worth celebrating. And it wasn't that my family didn't do those things. They did. Just not for me. My brothers got shiny new bicycles, handheld gaming consoles, and phones the minute they asked. My sister had a full party every year with decorations, music, and little gift bags for her friends. She wore name-brand clothes while I was told to be grateful for hand-me-downs or clearance rack leftovers. They got to pick what was for dinner on their birthdays. I was told we were keeping it simple when mine came around. Over time, that kind of disparity doesn't just sting, it reshapes the way you see yourself. I wasn't the baby. I wasn't the golden child. I wasn't the favorite. I was just there. A shadow in my own house. A quiet placeholder in family photos. And no one ever stopped to ask how that felt. I was never taken on family trips, not even once. While my parents packed up the car with snacks and luggage and my siblings climbed in with excitement buzzing in their voices, I was quietly dropped off at my paternal grandparents' house like an afterthought, a chore they had to check off before they could leave. The trips sounded magical, theme parks, beach resorts, road adventures with music and roadside stops, but I never saw any of it. Instead, I spent those days in a house that felt more like a prison than a place of care. My grandparents were strict, cold, and sometimes cruel in ways that even now are hard to put into words. There was no warmth in that house, no softness, no kindness. Just rules and silence and the feeling that I was always in the way. I remember one evening so clearly, it still makes my chest tighten when I think about it. I had been playing outside, quietly and alone as usual, and when I came to the door hungry and a little cold, my dad's brother, my uncle, opened it just enough to look at me. I asked if I could come in for dinner, and without saying a word, he simply shut the door in my face. I stood there on the porch, the smell of food drifting through the screen, the sound of laughter and clinking dishes carrying through the windows, and I realized I wasn't even considered part of them. Not really. I was just the one they left behind. The one no one missed when she wasn't there. All I had was my studies and sports, the only spaces in my life where I felt like I had any control, any sense of worth. School became my escape, a place where effort actually meant something, where grades and test scores couldn't be ignored or dismissed just because I wasn't the favorite. I poured everything I had into my classes, stayed late to help teachers, studied in the quiet corners of the library while other kids went home to warm dinners and encouragement. And when I wasn't in the classroom, I was on the field. I found my rhythm in athletics, in the rush of running, the discipline of training, the small but intoxicating satisfaction of pushing my body harder and faster than anyone expected. I started winning, ribbons, medals, certificates with my name printed proudly in bold letters. In soccer, I earned a starting position and held it season after season, helping our team reach regional finals more than once. Coaches praised me, teammates looked to me, and for once in my life I felt seen. But not by him. Dad, though calling him that always felt like a lie, Jim never came to watch. Not once. Not for the championship game, not for award ceremonies, not for anything. I used to glance up at the stands, hopeful in that naive, aching way that never completely goes away, scanning for his face among the sea of parents cheering and clapping. But the seat I imagined him in was always empty. He couldn't be bothered. No matter what I achieved, it was never enough to draw his attention. And that kind of silence, louder than any insult, taught me exactly where I stood in his world. Invisible. Unimportant. Unworthy of even a second glance. To feel at least a little worthwhile, like I had some kind of value beyond what my family refused to see, I started working as soon as I was old enough. At first, it was tutoring, helping younger students with math and science after school, finding tiny pockets of confidence in their progress and their gratitude. It wasn't much money, but it gave me a sense of purpose, a reason to stay late at school and avoid going home to the heavy silence and constant feeling of being unwanted. Eventually, I picked up shifts at the food court in the mall, wearing a stiff uniform and a smile that never quite reached my eyes as I handed out trays and cleaned up after strangers. It was exhausting balancing work and school and sports, but I preferred it. Every extra hour spent away from that house felt like breathing air I had been denied for years. Being busy meant I didn't have to sit through dinners where no one asked how my day was or weekends where I was left out of family plans that somehow never included me. Work gave me more than just money, it gave me distance, and in that distance, a flicker of self-respect I clung to like a lifeline. My mom, Mary, would sometimes try to carve out these small moments just for us, little pockets of warmth in an otherwise cold and divided home. Every once in a while, when Jim and the other kids were off doing something, family trips I wasn't invited to, sports games I wasn't part of, or even just errands that never included me, she'd take me out for ice cream or sit with me in the backyard while I did my homework. She'd ask about my classes, sometimes smile at my test scores, and for a fleeting moment I'd feel like maybe she saw me, maybe she understood. I held on to those moments more tightly than I should have, because deep down, I wanted so badly for her to be my safe place. And I know she tried in her own quiet, conflicted way. But the truth is she didn't protect me. She didn't speak up when Jim ignored me, when my siblings treated me like a ghost, when holidays passed with gifts for everyone but me. She never fought for me, never said, "This isn't fair," or "She deserves more too." She simply let it happen like she had no power or no will to disrupt the imbalance. I wanted her to fight. I needed her to stand between me and the loneliness I was drowning in. But instead, she offered me sprinkles on a cone and a soft pat on the shoulder, and then sent me back into a home that never felt like mine. One evening, I came home from work, tired and smelling faintly of fryer grease, my feet aching and my backpack heavy with textbooks, and as I stepped through the door, I heard voices drifting from the living room. My mom, dad, and aunt were talking, their words low and casual in the way people speak when they think no one else is listening. I paused in the hallway to take off my shoes, not really trying to eavesdrop, just catching my breath before heading to my room. And then I heard it, my aunt's voice, sharp and unfiltered, cut through the hum of their conversation like a slap. "Oh, here comes the bastard." I froze mid-step. My heart stopped, my throat tightened, and for a second I thought I had misheard, that maybe she meant something else, maybe it was a joke or a word thrown carelessly into the air without real meaning. But the silence that followed said otherwise. It was the kind of silence that happens when everyone knows something terrible has just been said. I stood in the hallway, pulse pounding in my ears, and then I did something I didn't plan. I walked straight into the room and looked her in the eye. What was that supposed to mean? I asked, my voice trembling but steady, needing the answer even if it shattered me. Because I knew. I think, on some level, I had always known. But hearing it aloud, without the mask of civility or denial, felt like the floor cracking open beneath my feet. My so-called dad looked at me with this expression I couldn't read, part guilt, part discomfort, part something I didn't even recognize, and all he said was, "I'm sorry." No explanation, no denial, no attempt to soften the blow. Just two words that somehow made everything worse. I turned to my aunt, hoping she would say it was a joke, a misunderstanding, something twisted out of context. But instead, she shrugged like it was no big deal and said, "You're not his son." Just like that. Cool. Final. Like she was stating a fact about the weather. I couldn't move for a second, couldn't breathe. I looked at my mom, desperate for her to say something, anything, that might undo what had just been said, that might pull me back from the edge. But she didn't say a word. She didn't deny it, didn't rush to my defense, didn't even meet my eyes. Her silence was louder than anything she could have said. I turned and walked to my room in a daze, my legs moving without thought, the weight of that moment pressing down on me like something physical. As soon as the door closed behind me, I collapsed. I didn't just cry, I broke. Everything inside me cracked open at once. Years of feeling like an outsider, of wondering why nothing I did was ever enough, of being left out, pushed aside, looked through instead of seen, it all made sense, and that clarity hurt more than all the confusion ever had. I buried my face in my pillow and sobbed until there was nothing left. My mom came into my room late that night after everyone else had gone quiet, the house thick with a silence that felt like it could suffocate me. I was still curled up in bed, my body aching from crying so hard for so long, my pillow damp and cold beneath my face. She didn't say anything at first, just walked over and sat down beside me, gently pulled me into her arms, and held me while I cried all over again. Her hand moved slowly across my back, and for a moment I let myself lean into her, let myself remember what it used to feel like to be comforted by her before everything fell apart. But even as she hugged me, something inside me had shifted. I couldn't pretend everything was okay anymore. I couldn't pretend that her silence hadn't broken something between us, or that a few quiet tears could erase the truth I had learned that night. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a hollow feeling in my chest. I needed to breathe to get out of that house before it swallowed me whole. So I called my best friend, Travis, my voice still hoarse and uneven, and asked if he could come pick me up. He didn't ask questions, just said he'd be there in 10 minutes. We drove around in his old car, windows down even though it was too cold, and when we parked by the river I finally told him everything. Every word. Every detail. From the cupcake birthdays to the door slammed in my face, from the silent stares to the truth spilled by my aunt. Travis didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix it or fill the silence. He just listened, his jaw clenched, eyes sharp with anger and sadness. And in that quiet, I felt the smallest bit of weight lift, not gone but shared. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely alone. Travis sat beside me on that weathered old bench by the river, watching the water ripple beneath the overcast sky, and after a long stretch of silence, he turned to me and said he wanted to talk to his parents. He said he thought I could stay with them for a while, just until I figured things out, until I had the space to breathe without feeling like I was suffocating in a house full of people who had never really seen me. I didn't answer right away, just stared out at the water, my heart pounding at the thought of actually leaving, actually stepping away from everything I had ever known, even if what I'd known was mostly pain. But then he added, "You don't have to go through this alone," and something in his voice made my throat tighten. He reached over and pulled me into a hug, the kind of hug that said everything words couldn't, the kind that held me up when I didn't realize how much I was still crumbling. I nodded against his shoulder, finally saying yes, not just to the offer but to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, I deserved better than what I had been given. That maybe being seen, being wanted, being safe wasn't too much to ask for after all. When I returned home later that day, everything felt different, not just the house itself but me. I moved through the halls like a guest, like someone passing through a place they no longer belonged to, and I stopped trying to make myself small or agreeable. I avoided everyone. I kept to my room, ate my meals at odd hours, left for school early and came home late. I didn't have the energy or the desire to pretend anymore. And the biggest shift, the one that cracked something open in the atmosphere, was when I stopped calling Jim Dad. From that day forward, I called him by his first name. No anger, no ceremony, just quiet, deliberate clarity. The first time I did it, he blinked like he wasn't sure he'd heard me right, but he didn't say anything. The second time I saw it hit him. That small, almost imperceptible flinch when I said, "Jim, I need the laundry room," instead of "Dad." My mom pulled me aside later, her voice low and tight, and told me it hurt him. She said it like I'd done something cruel, like I'd wounded a man who had done nothing but love me. And I remember just staring at her, wondering how she could say that with a straight face. It hurt him? Really? Was that what we were worried about now? His feelings? After everything? After years of exclusion and silence and pretending I was his child just long enough to maintain the illusion? That one word, Jim, wasn't meant to be an insult. It was just the truth. And apparently, the truth was more painful than anything he'd ever done to me. I finally sat down with my mother one evening, the air between us thick with everything we had never said, and I told myself I wasn't going to leave that table without answers. I was tired of tiptoeing around the truth, tired of swallowing questions that had been festering inside me for years. So I looked her in the eye and asked plainly and without hesitation, "Why did you let everyone humiliate me like that? Why did you just stand there and let them treat me like I didn't belong?" Her face changed instantly, all the practiced composure slipping away as her mouth opened, then closed again, like she was struggling to find the right lie and realizing she couldn't anymore. I didn't stop there. I pressed forward, my voice steadier than I expected it to be, and asked the question that had been burning at the center of everything since the night in the hallway. Who is my real father? And that's when she broke. Not dramatically, not loudly, but in this quiet unraveling that I'd never seen in her before. Her hands shook as she reached for her glass of water, her shoulders sagged and tears welled up in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks in slow, helpless streams. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked and all she could do was whisper, "I didn't know how to tell you." I sat there, heart pounding, watching the woman who had stood silently in the background of my pain for so many years finally crumble under the weight of her own silence. And in that moment, everything I had suspected, everything I had feared, was confirmed without her even needing to say another word. It turned out I was the result of her betrayal, the consequence of a moment she'd buried for years under layers of shame and silence. She told me, through broken sentences and a voice shaking with guilt, that back in college she had been dating a guy she truly loved, someone she thought she might marry one day. But then there was a party, too much alcohol, a night she barely remembered, and in that blur of bad choices and blurred boundaries she ended up in bed with his best friend. That night destroyed everything. When the truth came out, she lost it all. Her boyfriend left her, furious and heartbroken. Her friends sided with him, cutting her off without hesitation. Her family, already rigid and judgmental, refused to support her. She found herself completely alone, pregnant, and drowning in the consequences of one night. And then Jim came along. He wasn't a savior, she didn't paint him that way, but he was willing. Willing to give her stability, willing to marry her, willing to raise a child that wasn't his. But even from the beginning she admitted he never truly accepted me. He did what he believed was honorable, what looked good from the outside, but his heart was never in it. He raised me with the bare minimum, provided a roof and food and structure, but not love. Not warmth. Not belonging. I was a reminder of her mistake and he never let me forget it. And now, sitting across from her, hearing the full truth for the first time, I realized that the emptiness I had carried my whole life wasn't just imagined, it was inherited. Built into the very foundation of how I came to be. When I finally told my mom everything, the parts she hadn't seen or maybe just chose not to see, the room went quiet except for the sound of my voice. I told her about the way Jim's family treated me, how it went far beyond cold shoulders or cruel words. I told her how I was beaten when I was too loud or simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, how they would ignore me completely at meals, acting like I wasn't even in the room, how there were nights when I was locked in my bedroom for hours, sometimes without dinner just because someone had a bad day and I was the easiest target. I told her how I learned to cry into my pillow without making a sound because even my tears seemed to annoy them. She sat there, her face slowly crumbling, and then she burst into tears. Not quiet ones this time, but full sobs, her hands covering her face as if hiding from the weight of what I had just laid bare. She said she always knew they didn't like me, that much was clear, but she had no idea how deep their cruelty went. She had convinced herself it was just distance, just a lack of connection, not outright abuse. And I could tell in that moment that she was being honest. She had truly never allowed herself to imagine the full extent of what I had endured under her roof. But honesty didn't undo the years. Her tears didn't erase the nights I spent wondering what I had done to deserve being treated like less. And as I sat there watching her cry, I felt a strange mix of grief and release, because finally, the truth had been spoken out loud, but it had taken me bleeding out at her feet for her to see it. In the evening, long after the house had gone quiet and the weight of the day still sat heavy in the air, Jim knocked softly on my door. It was the first time he had entered my room in years, maybe ever, not to scold or criticize, but simply to step into my space. I didn't say anything as he walked in, his eyes moving slowly over the walls where I had hung the few things that made me feel proud. My medals, certificates, pieces of myself I had earned through work and pain, never expecting him to notice. He paused in front of them, silent for a long time, and then reached out and took one of the medals gently in his hand, the one I'd won at regionals for track. He stared at it like he had never seen it before, even though it had been there for years, and then, to my surprise, his shoulders started to shake. He cried. He stood there with that medal in his hand, tears streaming down his face, and he turned to me and said he was sorry. Not in passing, not in a muttered, careless way, but in a voice full of weight and regret. He apologized for not seeing me, for treating me like I didn't matter, for all the years of silence and distance and bitterness he had let grow between us. Then, slowly, like he was afraid I might flinch, he stepped closer and wrapped his arms around me. It was the first time he had ever hugged me. I didn't know what to do at first, my arms frozen by my sides, my heart racing with the shock of it. But then I let myself lean into it, not because everything was suddenly fixed, but because some part of me had always wanted this, for him to see me, even just once, as his child. I told him that maybe, with time and honesty and real change, I could begin to forgive him. I didn't promise healing or reconciliation, but I told him I was willing to hold space for the possibility. What I couldn't forgive, though, what I wouldn't even consider, was his family. I said it calmly, without bitterness in my voice, but with a firmness I had never used before. They had crossed too many lines, inflicted too many wounds, and I would not subject myself to their presence again, not even for the sake of keeping peace. Not long after that, I packed my things and moved in with Travis and his family. His parents welcomed me without hesitation, clearing out the guest room and setting a place for me at their table like I had always been meant to be there. They didn't pry or ask for details I wasn't ready to give. They just made it clear, in their words and actions, that I could stay for as long as I needed. That I was safe. That I was wanted. And even though I still don't know who my biological father is, even though that truth remains a question mark in my story, I've started to understand something more important. I deserve love. I deserve kindness. I deserve respect. Not because I've earned it through good grades or endurance, not because I've suffered and survived, but simply because I exist. I am just as worthy as anyone else. And for the first time in my life, I believe it.